see you all. My name is Lexi Mills. I'm going to talk to you about some advanced PR SEO strategies. We're going to look a little bit at adapting to changes in the publishing industry, because I kind of stalk people in publishing a lot to find out what they're doing and how I can hack it. We're going to look a little bit at legal compliance, because if I didn't mention GDPR then I would feel really bad, but I know we're all quite sick of it, so I'm just going to show you how I'm managing it. And then how you create impactful campaigns. And a little bit about sort of what we can expect in the future. So my job has largely been to get links and coverage from places like this, for clients like this, so all sectors of clients. And I did this initially working for an SEO agency, PR agencies, and in-house. And that was kind of fun. I rocked up most of these jobs. They didn't either have a digital department or a PR department, and I just had to figure it out. Now, if you're in-house, you have different challenges to what you have when you're SEO agency side versus PR agency side. So then I went out on my own. And I'm not going to lie, it was rainbows and sunshine the whole way through. I got to do everything my way and just take clients that wanted to do things my way. I didn't have to put up with the PR restrictions on SEO or the SEO restrictions on PR. And then I got more and more projects. And I was sat there all by myself. And I was like, I don't want to say no because this is really fun, but I can't do it all by myself. And suddenly I realized that I had scalability in PR, I had scalability in SEO, and even in-house there was some level of scale, preset in the way the industries are structured. But when I was on my own doing Lexi's formula, none of these things worked. I called people in SEO and said, how do you scale yourself? People in PR, and none of them told me anything remotely useful. They tried, maybe it was interpretation. And I happened to be sitting next to a girl in a co-working space one day, and I was like, how do you scale yourself? And she's a neuroscientist, super logical, medical SEO, and she's like, well, what's in your little black book? And I was like, well, it's not just contacts, it's loads of stuff. And I started splurting it out and almost aggressively explaining to her why it's not possible to scale a Lexi. The way I do things doesn't work on scale. She's like, well, just map it out. So this is what I mapped out. It's like, okay, well, I know trends. I have lots of contacts, I know experts, I speak geek and I speak creative. I'm interested in really random stuff, and I can convince clients to do really wild stuff. And all these skills are what make what I do possible. So how do I possibly get somebody else to do that? And I looked really hard, failed terribly at hiring, and then I was like, what do I do now? Do I just say no to these clients? She was like, no, let's just pick one. Let's just pick trends. Let's work out how you scale trends. I was like, okay. And I really, at the time, I was humoring her, but it turned out that it was me being humored. So she said, who else has similar challenges to you? Well, it's the publishing industry. More than PR and more than SEO, publishing suffers from exactly what I was suffering from. Lack of time and lack of resource. So what are they doing? Well, they're using a mixture of machine and human in order to be able to scale. So let me show you what I mean. They either formulate things or they hack something. And I was like, that's great. I'm going to mimic or hack them. I'm going to work out how they're taking these machines and these humans, and I'm going to scale the bits I can by copying them, and then I'm going to hack the stuff that I can hack. And I was like, this sounds like fun. This is where I sit. This is my comfort zone. Now, if you look at most publications, they kind of cover the same stuff. Pokemon Go was the best example of this. You look anywhere, on any publication, they're all covering Pokemon Go. Pretty much everyone was covering Trump. And that's because largely, a lot of publications are using technology to tell them what to cover. And in some instances, over 50% of what they cover is dictated by the publication's technology. So if you can work out what they're going to be told to cover and pitch to that, you're more likely going to win. Pretty simple. And this can be a whole media strategy. So I got this client that I adored called Kai. They're the future of human interface technology. Sounds kind of cool. It was even cooler in real life. Basically, they have all these research papers from amazing academics all over the world, from Microsoft, Cambridge, MIT, and they have a conference. And they said, will you do PR for the conference? I was like, I will. Will I get to speak to geeks? Will I get to play with tech? Yes. So I'd planned this whole weekend it was actually Christmas, so it was going to be 4 days of just reading amazing geek stuff and then thinking about which ones I wanted to PR. I didn't ask the right questions at sales. And they sent me 150 academic papers. I was like, oh crap, I have a problem. So I was like, okay, let's think about the fact that journalists are going to cover trends. And I was like, okay, let me go on Kickstarter and see what are the top things that are trending on Kickstarter. Found those. Then I booked a flight to CES and I flew down to Vegas and I walked around and I looked at what were the dominant themes. You know, what were all the journalists talking about? What was everyone covering? Then I put all of that into a list. Then I took all the academic papers and I searched for frequency of these terms and I created a shortlist. And that was the shortlist of the papers I A, read and B, PR'd. And we looked at some of Google Trends as well. So we put the most energy behind the ones that had the highest volume of search or the most increased volume of search. All this was a formula. And we got over 100 articles. We were targeted on 20. And it was purely based at thinking about the fact that journalists are going to have to cover certain stuff. And a mixture of SEO metrics and hands-on rock up at a tech conference and work out what's going on helped us do this. But when I was trying to scale myself, I was like, well, I don't know if a team member would just think to go to CES. But then I came up with this other idea. I don't know if you guys are familiar with eToro. It's an app for trading. And I'd never traded before, but it turns out drunk trading is a lot of fun, right? And so I set up eToro and I started playing with it as a means of understanding trends. And it works really well because search volume and VC deals run side by side. So if you know SEO, you can be pretty good at least emerging tech trading. And so that's what I get all my team to do. So when people join us, everyone gets eToro and they get some money in it. I did try it without money. They have a virtual account. Nobody cares if it's not real money. You have to give them real money. But you will learn so much about what is an emerging trend based on what is getting money, what's going up, what's going down. You don't even need to look at the Kickstarter trending items. You've got your team checking their app because they want to know how much money they've made. It works really well. It's a lot of fun, and they're all much better at trading than I am, unfortunately. So then I started to look at contacts because Melissa, who's now my business partner, who is Brain in the Pinky and Brain scenario, she said, okay, let's talk about contacts. That was kind of easier. I was like, okay, let's start with the media ones and let's just get BuzzStream. And BuzzStream were awesome. They imported all my emails from the beginning of time into BuzzStream, and so they had a history of all the email pitches I'd done and which ones were successful. Pretty easy, right? We built our own database. All the team feed into it now. And it gives you a little bit of GDPR protection. Not loads, but because the system has a login, it's got one layer of due diligence. And the great thing is, you can log into it when you're chatting to a client, and they'll say, I want to be on this publication. And I'll pull it up, and I'll be like, oh, yes, we spoke to that journalist on this day, and this is what they wanted, and this is what they said they would publish if we gave it to them. So actually, we make quite a lot of sales just off the database, which was actually designed to manage my own media contacts. I also had a bunch of just random academic contacts, like experts and journalists, that when I was just on my own as a freelancer, I would ring a journalist and say, what do you think about this story? But that doesn't really scale. So we used BuzzStream, and we just emailed a bunch of journalists and said, can we pay you $25 to $75 for your feedback on an idea? Most of them said yes. So we put them all into BuzzStream, tagged them with all their interests and all their backgrounds, and now whenever we get a content idea, we contact them and get them to verify it. Now, we had to throw money at it, because when it's just a friend doing a friend a favor, it's different. But actually it scaled quite well. And it's not hard to find a freelance journalist that will give you feedback on an idea. And it makes you really a lot more confident about executing it. The other thing we did with the Journalist Consulting Board is that we started to ask them if they wanted to write, if they did data research, and that became super useful as well. So now we have two sides to it. Then there's this other side of being able to convince others to do things. Now, you have to be really convicted in your ideas to convince someone to do a really ridiculous idea. And a journalist saying it's a good idea is far better than you saying it. But equally, a journalist saying it's a shit idea is also a lot better than you saying it is. Because clients will come up to you with a bunch of ideas, and you instinctively, as if you've worked in PR long enough, know which ideas are good and bad. But you don't actually need to break the client relationship by telling them that you think it's bad. You can get a journalist to do it. Now let's talk about experts. In every story, whenever I'm PRing something, I'm always looking for, there's the actual story, there's the client voice, but you kind of want another voice, because otherwise it smells like PR. And it's actually got to look like journalism, not smell like PR. So we built a whole database just of academic experts. And most of this actually came out of the Kai project. All the people who wrote those papers, I contacted all of them and said, would you like to be an expert? And now we can just search for experts really quickly. But honestly, if you go onto Google's academic database and you search academic papers with keywords and contact those guys, they will respond. Because most academic research doesn't go very far unless they get PR, because they don't get funding unless they get out in the public domain. So it's a mutual benefit, and it's super, super easy to do. And then I have to mention Gorkana. So I did some math for you, because do any of you use Gorkana? It's expensive, right? It's not super cheap. But this is how I worked out math on a small team. The average time to find a contact, about 5 minutes, right? On average, 3 to 5 minutes. So that's 180 seconds on average per contact. For 100 people, that's about 5 hours of work. Well, I can do that in 2 hours with Gorkana. And they're really the right contacts, the exact details, the exact phone numbers. And every time I model the math, because I tracked it in a really detailed fashion when we were building out press lists, it was just cheaper to have Gorkana. And if you look at the Gorkana emails, they send these out like 4 or 5 times a day if you have the UK and the US database. And this is just showing you how many people are moving day in, day out. As much as we have our own internal database, you are never going to succeed with the amount journalists move around unless you've got a big system behind you. So although it feels heavy-weighted, I had to bite the bullet and buy it. And honestly, it made the world of difference. And it does this other cool thing. Do any of you do local SEO or content link building? If you go into Gorkana and you put in the postcode, it will tell you how many publications are in that area. So the moment someone rings me and says, hey, can you do PR in this sector or in this location? In the past, I'd be drawing on my own personal knowledge. But for a team, I had to scale that out a bit. They can just put the postcode into Gorkana and it will tell them, well, with this postcode, yeah, there's several hundred publications. We can do local SEO there. Whereas if it comes up with 4 or 5, then you have to widen the territory, and that's how you know that your piece of content can't be about small. I live in a town called Bright Walton in Berkshire. Okay, there's 1 publication. But if I widen it out to Newbury, Berkshire, suddenly we've got a couple hundred, and that tells us how we need to construct our content. And you can do something else. So I had a client come to me and they said, we want to do something on windsurfing because that's a term we're not converting for. I was like, okay. So I put windsurfing in. 3 publications, 2 have ceased. Who thinks it's a good idea to do something on windsurfing? But, okay, what about sports? Water sports. Okay, 253. How about a piece on water sports that focuses on windsurfing? Then suddenly you've got a viable content idea. The thing is, when we're investing in these systems, we think that we're just buying contacts. But when you start to see it as a vetting system for content ideas, you start to feel a hell of a lot better about paying all that money. And it has some really good response source stuff. Do you guys use response source, Harrow? Yep. So Gorkana has its own version as well. I log these. So I have an index of these from about maybe 15 years. And I will search what publications have been asking for month on month, year on year, and when they've been asking for it. So if you sign a baby clothing company, and then you go into your response sources of the last 3 years under parenting, you can search the parenting category. It will tell you all the things that people ask for every single year, year in, year out. It's the beginning of your content strategy, your outreach strategy. It's not just a tool to help you get live coverage from journalists asking for things. It's a tool to help you construct the entire nature of your content plan. Now, there's been some developments in editorial decision making that are a bit bleak. I'm not going to ask you which one of you have done black hat SEO, but I'd like to talk a little bit about black hat publishing. I met with a journalist of a very big publication a few weeks ago, and they don't cover anything that doesn't have high Amazon reviews, because they get the click-throughs. If you're doing product PR, you might want to work on your Amazon reviews before you do actual PR or link building, because I don't think this is unique to the one journalist that leaked this to me. This is unique to the nature of the situation. And are any of you familiar with AI and the machine learning happening in publishing? It's happening a lot in business and finance, and they're producing 12 times the amount of coverage using machines. Now, we talk a lot in PR and SEO about one-to-one pitching, the customized pitch. It's all about you. You spend ages on it. How do you pitch a machine? 12 times the amount of coverage they are producing by machine. You want to pitch machines. And the great thing is machines can be pitched in an automated fashion. And they pull most of their content from newswires and from the news at addresses. So news at Daily Mail, news at the Telegraph, right? They're pulling it, the machines are pulling from that. It's primarily Reuters at the moment and the AP. So if you're US based and you're doing business and finance, you need to be spamming the news at address with your press releases. And they need to be in a very standard format. And you'll end up getting automatic coverage, which means there's a whole new meaning to mail merge. Now, I'm big into my personalized contact, but I'm pitching the machines like crazy because I have a lot of finance clients and it's working extraordinarily well. I'd be careful about the wires. You can click different options when you're setting up a wire so that you don't create followed links to your site, and then you don't risk getting any issues from doing the wire, but the wires are the primary way they're taking this content. But the cool thing is, really, how do we think this will evolve? And I like this the most because it's the perfect merger of PR and SEO, but the difference is SEO has the upper hand here. So if I talk to you about P0, knowledge graph, don't we all feel a bit like this? Like it's the precious, right? We all want to be the answer to something on Google, but it doesn't really bring us traffic. It might bring us brand recognition, but it doesn't do much else. The only reason we've ever really wanted it, or I've ever really wanted it, is because it makes me feel like a frickin' rock star when my client is the answer to something. But there's a new reason. Google Answer Box could help us target media in the light of AI. So this is a page on credit card debt. This was the answer, isn't anymore, but it was the answer to American credit card debt statistics. Look at the amount of links this gets. They update it regularly. And I was speaking to a couple of journalists and I said, well, what are you going to build into your AI next? And they said, well, AI is just an automation of a manual process. When I need credit card debt statistics, what do I put into Google? Credit card debt statistics. What do I get up? This page. Why do I get this page? Because it has these metrics. So we're going to start scraping from Google Answer Box. We might want Google Answer Box more than we think, and it might actually have a real quantitative value. And it can help you create content right now. So the client that made me aware of Google Answer Box and that particular page is Finder. And they came to me and they said, we want to beat this page. Now, I showed you the metrics, right? Does anyone want to try and beat that page? Not really, not if you want to keep the client, right? So I turned around to them and said, okay, going for gold means getting that page. How do you feel about silver? And so instead of looking at credit card debt, we went for impulse spending. Pretty much the same kind of interest, right? Not a bad one, not exactly what they wanted. And then I knew that from looking at search terms that Internet of Things, robotics were all on the up and up. So we created the first impulse spending handbag. This handbag opens and closes according to peak spending times. It has geo-tracking in it. So as you're walking down the street and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy an ice cream, it locks, right? Could probably be used for weight loss. I hadn't thought about that. So probably next evolution, the weight loss handbag. This time next year. But we've just built a page, but we completely mimicked the content structure of the debt management, the credit card debt page. So we put a whole load of key information about it up there. We did a survey because they had a survey on their page. We did frequently asked questions, and we put a whole load of images up. But I want to draw your attention to one thing. See, the bag kind of looks a little funky, right? We could argue what that funky means in this definition. Well, it's because we got a top designer to make it. Now, Jehovah is a lovely guy. He's an extraordinary creative. We made it quite challenging to work with. But the reason I did it was Jehovah hadn't had a fashion show in 2 years, and he was going into New York Fashion Week. So I commissioned him to design the outside of the bag because I knew that would get it on the runway. Now, from a PR perspective, an impulse spending handbag on a runway doesn't actually help anyone. But from a link perspective, that's a whole new category of links I can go after. So that's what we did. And look, he loves his handbag. FYI, we also launched it in the US and Britain. You can FedEx things that don't look like bombs. You can't FedEx things that do and expect them to arrive, but you can DHL them. Campaign, 66 inbound links. It really wasn't that hard to do. We used everything that I told you about. We targeted the machines. So we did the press releases on the wires, both in the UK and the US. We emailed the news addresses, and we did all our manual outreach on top. But it didn't take that long. There were 3 of us working on this, not that many. But we built the content to engage people, and that's the important thing. You know, anyone who needs financial advice doesn't Google financial advice. What they do is they impulse spend, right? And they read fashion pages. So by targeting people, we actually targeted journalists and Google, because journalists recognize that we're actually doing something good. This is content that would be relevant to their audience, and we'd connected them in the right way. So I want to talk to you about 2 other parts: wild creativity and speaking geek and creative. How the frick do you scale that? Okay, I did 3D design at university, not super helpful en masse, but it did mean that I learned how to code, and I learned how to operate big machines, which are quite fun, and so I could speak to coders and I could speak creatively. But more importantly, it made me feel really free. Like if I wanted to make a robotic handbag, I feel like I can go make a robotic handbag. I'm like, oh, I'll get some robotics, I get a handbag, you stick it all together with glue gun. It was largely glue gun. But a lot of PRs or SEOs don't have that background in material science. And they don't have that background in speaking to the wildly different people. Like PRs don't typically speak to coders. So I was like, well, how do I deal with this? And this is when I hired my ex-flatmate, Dr. Claire Asher. She's a professional science communicator. She deals with all our experts and does the liaison, and she's brilliant at it. In fact, she's better than I was, which was kind of interesting because I was just trying to work out how I scaled myself. But actually, I ended up working out how to be better than. And Gemma Dodd is a creative but also a journalist, and she does all of the design and product work. And they're both contract, so I don't have to have a 100% responsibility to them. But whenever we have an idea, or the team does, we can just ring them. And this brings me to the next question of hustle. Hustle is probably the most important thing you can ever do if you want to be impactful. You know, I didn't make a robotic handbag because I knew how to do it. What I did was speak to everyone and just ask everyone I knew until somebody helped me. How do you scale hustle? You know, in this day of data overload, are you guys familiar with Finding Nemo? You must be, right? Okay, this fish has more concentration span than all of us put together. You can't expect a journalist to pick up a phone, an engineer to help you unless you're willing to hustle. But how do you scale and manage that? Well, I have a 3-touch point rule. You're not allowed to send 1 email or make 1 phone call to anyone unless you've written your 2 follow-ups. And most of the time, you only have to send the second one. But this is true for both internal and external communication. You don't get clients to make robotic handbags because you ask them once and don't follow up. And I pretty much used Boomerang for this when it was just me. Boomerang is great. Does anyone use it? Yep. Yeah, it will save your inbox, and it means you don't have to remember to hustle people. But BuzzStream has this thing called sequences, so you can schedule hustle, right? You mark the different emails and when to go, and you do if this or then that queries. It's brilliant, scaled hustle. And I can log in and manage hustle. I can see who hasn't been hustled, who responded, what type of hustle worked. It's so much fun. You can do it with parents too, for things that you want. I've been trialing that. So let's talk a little bit about hacking hustle, because I spoke to you a bit about the skills it took to make the handbag. Well, I had to get an office recently, and I was thinking I don't want to spend all this money on an office. It doesn't feel like fun. It's a big responsibility. Can I hack hustle by getting a really effective office space? Is there a way that I can create an environment that makes it easier to hustle, in the same way that BuzzStream sequences made it easier to send follow-ups, or Boomerang did? And I was like, well, can I make some impactful things easier, things that I might avoid doing? Now, with most press, if you've got a really awesome headshot, you're more likely to go to the top of the pile. The amount of times I've had really big coverage just because I had a full head-to-toe shot of a client and somebody else didn't, and they might even had a better story, it's unreal. I don't know if you've ever tried to talk someone into getting headshots who's never had them or who hasn't had them in 20 years. Okay, firstly, they'll never like them because they'll look 20 years older, and that's a problem for them, right? You can put them in black and white, that helps, and then you put them in color later once they've accustomed to the fact they've gotten older. But what really helps is if you have a photo studio in your office, and as you're walking to the meeting, you're like, oh, shall we just go in here and do some test headshots? You get your test headshots, right, on the way to a meeting. Those become the headshots you use because they will be better than the rubbish ones they gave you. And if you turn around to them and say, you're getting an article and a link from the Telegraph if you let me use your test headshot, do you think they're going to say no? Of course they're not. And then this handbag. I told you it looked like a bomb, right? Well, I was staying in a hotel when I had to assemble this. Now, assembling a bomb in a hotel, not a good look. These are the components, like full-blown bomb. Like, they came up with room service, and I was just like, leave it outside! Because I swear they were going to arrest me. This is New York City. This is Midtown, like bomb country. I can't expect staff to be dealing with looking like that all the time. And I don't think it's going to be the first time I made something that looked like a bomb. So therefore, if it's not going to be the last, I need a place to do such creations. And so we found an office that had both a photo studio and a workshop in. And you'd be surprised the amount of times I just find the team in there just making something up and bringing it to a client meeting. We have a 3D printer. If someone disagrees with an idea, we can 3D print it in the time it takes to finish the meeting and then show it to them. But I wouldn't normally, if I had to go out and book a studio, that's a big expense. It's a lot of effort. But by making it so quick and easy, suddenly you scale the things that you know you should be doing. Because a lot of the times we know what we should be doing, but the effort to get there is so much that we don't do it. If you can hack your environment to be more effective, you will be more impactful with your link building. Are you all familiar with medical oaths? Doctors, they stand and they do that big, I pledge to do no harm. Okay. The advertising industry also has some oaths that they take, some sort of codes of conduct. So does the PR industry. We actually have 2. The SEO industry doesn't have any. Just like to throw that out there. You can't hack morals or ethics at all. We have quite a big responsibility at this point in time. We are the Wild West. We kind of get to do what we want. The internet is the greatest, fastest growing land in existence. And the only people who control it are pretty much SEOs and PRs and content marketers at this point in time. We get to choose what content comes up and what comes down. You know, there's one thing to be great at getting links and optimizing stuff, but it's really important to think about what we're optimizing and what that does to the way people think. I spend a lot of time considering that, and when I'm coming up with content ideas, one of my first thoughts are, who needs this information? Not who's searching for it, but who needs it. If you can bridge that gap, you will be the best link builder out there. Finding people who need it but aren't searching for it and connecting that to the content. That is where the gold dust in every idea lies. I'm going to leave you with 3 last points. Squeeze the juice out of every tool you have. Think about what I said about response source. It's not just something that helps you know what journalists want now. It tells you what they've always wanted historically. Gorkana isn't just a tool for data. It's a tool for telling you if your content idea is good or not. Squeeze the juice out of everything and make sure your teams do. And dissect where the real stories are. You know, it's easy to say this is what one part of the story is, but actually really pull it out. Find that bit in between. Find the piece that people really need to know. And remember, we have a choice every day of our lives to accept things as they are or take responsibility for changing them. You will not change things internally unless you take utter responsibility for it, and sometimes that means that you move offices. When I worked for bathrooms.com, every single one of my staff carried miniature rubber ducks with them everywhere. And all we do is put them in a beer glass, photograph it, duck in beer, duck in pond, duck in puddle with bread, extra good social media. You've got to make everything that you do the fabric of how your team operates. If you can hack that, you don't need anything else I've told you today. Thank you very much.